Do you remember your first time playing a video game? It was probably a magical experience, no matter how old you were. Well, what does that become for you now, though, if gaming has occupied most of your years? Maybe it's going through the motions. Maybe it's losing spark for you. Maybe it's still just as great as when you first started. Whichever one of those rings true, you should redefine your trajectory on gaming sooner or later to keep that spark and joy alive. These are my own methods, but feel free to share your own in the comments. Number 1. Purpose. Why exactly do you game, and what do you need from a game? Originally, you probably gamed because it was your favorite way to have fun. Maybe it was the only thing you had available to you in childhood. Or maybe it got you through the rough times in your life, providing you with a mental escape or sanctuary. But then time passes and we don't need to escape, or we have more options available to us, or fun by its own merit just simply doesn't do it for us. So what then? Maybe what we needed originally just isn't working for us anymore. And it's perfectly fine to outgrow old survival methods. Our lives are always ever changing. If you were to take the last few games you played recently, what were the common threads you liked about them? Did you like immersing yourself in a world full of lore, feeling like it's a living, breathing place you could live in? Do you want to place yourself in the shoes of those with internal struggles to learn more about yourself? Do you simply enjoy the thrilling heat of battle, reaching new heights with your skill level? Or do you want to decompress your mind with the repetition of tasks that award you with nice sounds and dopamine? I enjoy doing all of these things to some degree, and these may all be variations on where your passions began, but I'd propose that looking at it differently will help you see things in a new light. And it doesn't need to be limited to what I've brought up. Your experiences bring a lot of possibilities to the table. Number 2, ground yourself in the experience and live in the moment. Do you remember how every little thing was exciting and wondrous to you as a child? You had no past to your nostalgia from, and future expectations or anxiety didn't weigh you down. You were living in the moment, and it would be beneficial to you to reconnect with that. Now, it's not a bad thing to have expectations, but we can fall into the habit of wanting what isn't intended to be there in the first place. Each game we play should be looked at as its own experience, taking care to avoid nitpicks or making comparisons, at least until our experience is over with. There are plenty of little things that game developers add in to enhance our experience. Things that you like, but may not consciously acknowledge. Things like the way ale with Model HX equipped goes. The way lightning looks a little silly doing this. The way Rayman rolls after every jump. It's very important, by the way. Very, very important. The way Lance says, every time he needs to aggro an enemy, and how this is my favorite way to set the mood when playing Astral Chain.
Iris startup. Information display. Iris shutdown. Iris startup. Information display. Iris shutdown.
Now picture this. You're walking along the sidewalk. The sun is gently toasting your forehead with a fairly cooling breeze. You're looking down, thoughts running through your mind, when the shadow of a bird catches your eye in a surprise. It's headed in the direction of the meadow to your right. You look over, and although it's gone before you know it, you've never noticed what a nice sight that meadow was before. The very sight of it causes you to forget about what was troubling you. And there are plenty of great set pieces to take in no matter what you're playing. It's all just a matter of what you bring your attention to. Even music can be a marvel to take in its own right. The key is not to be concerned with whether or not you like the music, but to move with the instruments and consider what they make you feel. Let's take Final Fantasy IV as an example. Cecil Harvey is on his way back to the castle after being ordered to steal a precious relic from the neighboring town. He is questioning the morality of his deeds, and he feels the king is getting rather power-hungry. This brooding, oppressive theme plays to settle in that discomfort, wanting to support this great kingdom with undying loyalty, but the thought of doing so any longer feels like a gross display of misdeeds. I can't help but be awash with that discomfort as I explore and gather the thoughts of those who live in the castle. I imagine what Cecil's expression is underneath the helmet, how his posture might look as he walks. I picture these things, even if the limitations of the game doesn't allow for it, and I might even repeat voice lines to place myself further into the role. You might think this is a bit much, but you'll know it to yourself to make the most of your experience, right? Speaking of which, are you savoring your experience? Did you take time off of work so you could do nothing but play that new game you've been so excited for? I'm silently judging you. Just kidding. Although, I think our experiences can be enriched by taking more time away from the screen to think more on those little moments. You're more likely to remember the video game that you took 3 months to finish over the one you finished in 3 days. For more details on this, I would recommend the video titled, Are You a Binger or a Drifter? From Daryl Talks Games. He details that the longer you take to finish a game, the more the subtleties of the experience stick with you. Link to that in the description. Also, take some time to notice the things you like or dislike about what you're playing. Keeping a healthy balance is how you can appreciate the successful games and the not-so-successful ones. And of course, we're all short on time with school, work, family, etc., but if you remember to stop and smell the roses, I guarantee you'll thank yourself later for it. Number 3. Life circumstances. Do you remember the times in your life where you've made unnecessarily negative comments? Do you remember what you might have been dealing with during those times, and how you may have found yourself a little remorseful after that storm cleared? Living in the moment is easier said than done, and sometimes the troubles we deal with in life just occupy so much of our time and energy. It's almost like we end up with a void in our chest that sucks all the enjoyment from it all. Within reason, I would recommend dealing with those troubles as soon as you can. Mental health, a toxic relationship, an awful job, for example. All things you can change, given you can muster the time and energy to handle it. In the long run, it would be for the better. Here's an excerpt from my own life to give you a better idea of what I mean. A few years back, I had 2 online friends that I would spend a horrendous amount of time with. One of them I was closer with, the other being a recent addition to our former pair. To put it shortly, disputes between the two often broke out, and I would find myself playing mediator. Coupled with the fact that I was often neglected in this group of 3, this made it very difficult for me to find the joy in anything, really. I had apathy in everything unless I was gaming with them, and the only games I could play with them left me feeling restless and confined. This went on for about a whole year before a big break in my routine helped me realize what the issue was. I separated from them, and slowly vitality began to return to me. I kept trying to find the reason why, and that was all it took. Needless to say, I was very happy that I was able to find enjoyment in gaming again. Keep in mind, I don't bring this up to shame anyone. I share this in hopes that someone can learn from my experience a bit quicker than I did. What's draining the joy in your life, and what adjustments do you need to make? Number 4, watch less trailers and reviews. And
don't take advice from old people.
Now, I'm not looking to attack anyone's livelihood or anything, but I think YouTube has become heavily saturated with hate content, eager to dogpile on the next trendiest thing to dislike. I'm not saying that criticism isn't allowed, but you don't need to look very far to see bad faith. In a sense, I think the same applies to professional game reviewers. When it is your job to play video games and you're working with a tight schedule, you just aren't going to be able to enjoy it in the same way as someone who doesn't. It's not impossible, but I keep these things in mind when I'm watching a review or critique. If you have a jaded or closed-minded view on the content you regularly consume, impressionable viewers are going to go around repeating your talking points, even if they've been said a million times already. Even if you don't agree, it's still kind of a rain on your parade to come across these same conversations again and again. And for what games are to us, I think that's a real disservice, isn't it? Games aren't that easy to develop, and only do people realize that when they begin developing for themselves. I have a lot to say on this topic, but I recommend the video titled Bad Media Criticism by Sarah Z. I agree with a lot of what she talks about in the video. And maybe later on down the line, I can touch upon it more myself. As for trailers, you really don't need as many trailers as they put out. It's a saturated industry, so they include a lot of spoilers to compete. Before, trailers were rare, and we only had box art and screenshots to look at. That's how we decided on what we'd get when we were younger. You didn't always get what you expected from the box art, but in most cases you learned to be content with it. The less you know going in, the more you can be surprised. And I think surprise is an important factor, because disappointment is just as important as contentment. Number 5. Leave your comfort zone. The world ends with you. If you want to enjoy life, expand your world. You gotta push your horizons out as far as they'll go. For one such as me, who wasn't allowed outside in my childhood, that meant venturing outside of my favorite genres a little more often, even if I wasn't good at them. Not only will doing that help you appreciate your favorite genre more, it'll help you to appreciate what makes the other genres great. By extension, you could even explore hobbies outside of gaming, to keep things in your life fresh. If your favorite series has been disappointing to you for years, you have to do your part and move on. Think of it this way. It's amazing when you experience happiness, joy, excitement. But what if you were always happy, without the polarity of sadness or anger? Happiness would become your neutral emotion. It would become dull, wouldn't it? Isn't it great that we have these polarities of emotions? Isn't it great that we can choose to spend our time with a broad range of activities? Our comfort zone becomes that much greater when we spend time outside of it. So to recap, I've listed all my bullet points on the screen here. I believe that putting more mindfulness into our gaming would be an important stride for us all. I'm not hoisting myself on a pedestal here and saying that I always follow these to a T. I can fall into my own bad habits as well. Though it's when I fall into those bad habits that I find myself needing to dive back in for a better experience. I don't want to jump from game to game just to numb or distract myself. I'd like for these times to be as meaningful as I can make them. I think we could all strive for that. Hey, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please consider subscribing and supporting me on Patreon if you did. I've been Psychedelic Zuki, and I'll catch you next time.